I see Scott Shannon in the hallways of PLJ my first week there. And I'm doing intern stuff, making copies, folding T-shirts, going, handing out bumper stickers. And I went up to Scott Shannon. I go, hey, Scott, Rich, I'm an intern. I don't want to fold T-shirts. I want to learn from you. I want to be your intern. And he was like, I like your ambition. Starting Monday, you're my personal intern. When I first started getting into radio, I would compile air checks of people around the country, take a little bit from each, like, ooh, I like how he does that. There'd be videotapes of like Broadway Bill Lee and some of these legends and watching them in the studio. And I would do that. There was a point where if you named a city, I could tell you the station, the program director, and who's on the day parts. I wanted to be in the know. We're in the fishbowl, and Bruno Mars is walking by. Henry Winkler pops out of his chair, and he's like, oh my God, I love him. Bruno Mars. And Bruno sees that, makes eye contact, comes around, pops in the fishbowl, and they just have a love fest for each other. He's like, I love you. And Bruno Mars starts talking about, you're the Fonz. This is surreal. And he's like, but I love your album. I love you, Bruno. He's like, no, I love you, Henry. And Covino and I are just sort of sitting back watching this cool moment unfold. Kid Kelly said early on in my career, if you're kind to people and keep your nose clean, if you're not an asshole, you're kind to people and you're good, there'll be a place for you.
Hello and welcome to the Career Journey Podcast, No Wrong Choices. I'm Larry Samuels, soon to be joined by Tushar Saxena and Larry Shea. Today's episode features the radio, podcast, and TV personality Rich Davis. Before we bring him in, please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the show wherever you're listening right now. Let's get started. Now joining No Wrong Choices is the radio and podcast personality Rich Davis. With over 2 decades in the business, Rich has entertained listeners who enjoy everything from pop culture to hit music to sports. He can currently be heard or seen on Covino and Rich on Fox Sports Radio, the hit podcast Have Kids, They Said, which I look forward to talking about, and on the SiriusXM channels Pop 2K and The Pulse. Rich, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. Hey, I love seeing, faces from the past. And I want to add one thing to the list there. I'm the #1 kids coach in Southern California. You got to see me coach, man.
I think we're going to have a lot in common as we go through this conversation.
Like having seen the Bad News Bears, I probably know what your coaching style is like.
Yes.
And to that point, I am the coach of my son's T-ball team right now. So I think we're going to have a lot to talk about for sure.
Excellent.
No doubt.
Love it. It's Larry Shea here, Rich. It's really good to see you, man. It's been a lot of years. We've worked together for a couple of decades now at SiriusXM. And it was really one of my favorite parts of the day, man. You would finish your show and come bounding by my office in the hallway, as I used to call it. And we would talk sports and life and shoot the shit. And it was always just, you were one of the good ones, as they say, like as we connected.
Yeah, Larry, I feel the same about you, man. Like there's a group of people I feel like that were part of SiriusXM when it was just Sirius, when it was like this exciting new company. Listen, it's a huge billion-dollar cash flow company now, but those early days when, random people would be like, Larry, where do you work? Cyrus Radio?
Exactly.
Pretty much.
Those old school days,
Exactly.
You are friends like Diane Tonelli,
Yes.
Kathy Baruso, Chris Gibbons, people that like we've professionally worked with for 20 plus years that, I've seen people there, I'm same with you, have little kids that are like now in college.
Yeah, definitely. True shout outs to some legends at SiriusXM right there.
No doubt.
I get the fun part, man. I want to take you back to when you were a kid because I know you're like a lifetime radio guy, TV guy. Yeah. Take me back to young Rich Davis, though. What was the dream? What did you want to do when you were a kid?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of times you see little indications along the way. At the time, it might not be evident, but when you look back, you're like, shit, it makes sense now. Like, who wants to do the class announcements? Well, me, like who wants to take the lunch tally? Like, all right, who wants pizza? Who wants hamburgers? Like, I was the kid that was never shy to be on stage. I was never shy to get in front of the classroom and do a project. So I always felt pretty natural speaking in front of people. And then I remember thinking, I want to go into sports broadcasting or music or something. And my high school principal, a guy named Tom Dolan, a lot of people are like, yeah, my principal sucked. I don't even know him. My principal was a great dude. Like he pulled me aside and He's like, any hesitation of you maybe staying on Long Island or going local, like he's like, go to Syracuse, you're gonna do it. And I remember, and we'll always thank Tom Dolan for that. Went to Syracuse, and the cliff notes are simple. I was dating a girl long distance, and she dumped me. I went to her college dorm room, Larry, and we were on the rocks, and I knock on the door. You know when you sneak into a dorm, like you wait for someone to open it, you trail them in?
Sure.
Because we were going through like a rough moment.
You were stalking her.
Could be a word that's used, yeah. And I remember some dude answering the door. He's like, she's with me now.
Oh, wow.
And he was wearing like a backwards lacrosse hat and a goatee. It was the 90s. I'm like, who's this jerk off? And then I went back to my college. I was all mopey. And one of my friends said, hey, do you want to come to the college radio station? And I'm just like drowning in a beer sitting in my college dorm room. Like, I guess so. And for some reason, I went to the college station and some like confidence took over where I was like, wait, these are the guys that are on the radio? Yeah, I think I want to try it.
Yeah.
And I did. And it seemed like something that sort of came relatively natural and easy to me. And that's not always the case, right? So I said, let me roll with this. And, fast forward, I'm giving you the longest story ever.
No, it's all good.
Fast forward, I was at Syracuse, kept working at the college station, started working at Hot 107.9, which is a CHR in Syracuse. And Kid Kelly, who was working at Z100 in New York, I would send air checks. I was super ambitious back then. I made 50 demos, and I went to the copy center. Remember, you'd have to like burn CDs, and I printed out color resumes and shit. Like it was, and I sent it to 50 radio stations in like the top 25 markets. And one of those people that got back to me was Kid Kelly, and he had agreed to air check me, and which for those that don't know means like listen to my tape and give it some criticism. And I had become friends with him. And after a while, he hit me up and he's like, hey, what are you doing this weekend? And our usual conversations, I thought he meant like, yeah, dude, I'm going to try to hook up with some girls and drink at the bar. He goes, well, do you want to come down and do the overnight at Z100? And I was 20 years old. And I'm like,
wow.
Like 20?
Wow.
Working at Z100 in New York. And that just led into fill-ins and me just being available whenever they wanted me. Someone gets fired, I'm filling in. And then I was full-time there for 4 years. And that in 2004, when my contract was up there, Kid Kelly had been at this new company, Sirius Satellite Radio. And he's like, yeah, Cyrus Radio. And at the time, I'm like, do I move around the country? Like, where do I go from here? Yeah. And he's like, I promise you, just come to Sirius. And boom, here we are.
Awesome.
All right. So just to give some folks some perspective to like who Kid is, because Kid is, he's an enormous personality. Yeah. I mean, it's a legend in the radio business, especially when it comes to rock radio. I think didn't he recently get like inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Yeah, he was in the Radio Hall of Fame. He was he ran like all the biggest top 40 stations in the country. Kid was, and still is a big deal in that world. And it was always weird to me, like, wow, of all the people, you send out 50 resumes and demos. Maybe like 5 people got back to me, but all you needed was one, dude. All you needed was one important person, right?
I want to stay on that subject for a moment. The idea of sending out demos and sending out demos and whatnot. So was your goal your first time around that you wanted to do talk or you wanted to do music?
At the time, my college radio station was a pretty good, like it's considered like the best self-run college radio station. Like it's independently run, and there's commercials, and it's formatted. It's very official for a college station.
It's very professional.
Very pro, and it really prepared me. And I said, you know what? I remember going home one summer, and I had an internship opportunity at a public relations firm and WPLJ in New York, 95.5. And I just felt the contrast between the fun vibes of a radio station hallway and wearing a fucking suit to the PR agency. I feel like that was like one of those, am I going to make a left or right? And I went radio. And then on top of that, I had, when you don't realize you're having balls and like people are like, did you just do that? Scott Shannon, who's maybe one of the biggest legends in top 40 history.
Legendary figure.
So
absolutely.
I see Scott Shannon in the hallways of PLJ my first week there. And, I'm doing intern stuff, making copies, folding T-shirts, handing out bumper stickers, And I went up to Scott Shannon. I go, hey, Scott, Rich, I'm an intern. I don't want to fold t-shirts. I want to learn from you. I want to be your intern. And he was like, I like your ambition. Starting Monday, you're my personal intern. And I became Scott's personal intern for a summer.
Wow.
And yeah, it's just I feel like when I was a younger man, I made some pretty like ballsy moves, and I guess
that's a ballsy play.
Yeah,
that's a ballsy play.
I didn't know. People like, you went up to Scott. People don't do that. I'm like, well, I guess I did. It worked. Yeah, it worked.
That's great.
Do you know why you broke through at Kid Kelly? Like, what was the package, the tape, the resume? Like, what stood out?
Yeah, what did kids say?
Truthfully, I think I sounded a little like him, and people like people that are like them. And our conversations were very light and funny about, like he knew that I was a guy that was, I lived like a very fun life. Like I was a young guy that was talking about dating and hooking up and music and sports. And I think he saw a little of me in him when he was on his come up. So we bonded pretty quickly. So I think it was just one of those, I could mold this kid into what I need, When you were a kid, did you listen to the radio? Did you hear those guys and say, I wonder who those people are? Because like it seems like the first time you even thought about it was when you were bummed out about a girl. Yeah, it's funny, dude, booty will motivate you. The loss of a fine ass will motivate a man. But no, I do remember being in my car as a kid, like we all did. Like some listened to Stern, I remember listening to Elvis and Elliot. And it's so funny because Elvis Duran later became a friend of mine and still is, Mm-hmm. But I remember listening to Elvis and Elliot, and if they were in the middle of a good bit, I remember like not wanting to get out of the car. Like, and that's the power of radio. Like, if Howard or Elvis Duran or Mike and the Mad Dog, if they're in the middle of a good conversation, you'd be like, when you got to your destination, you'd be like, shit, I want to. There was no podcasting. I couldn't listen later.
Right. It was just gone if you got out of the car. It was into the ether.
Yeah.
Where are you getting your chops? Was it that first Kid Kelly overnight experience? Because you obviously can make some mistakes overnight without a big deal. But where are you getting those chops? You said it came naturally to you, but where are you honing that craft?
I think, you know what? I was when I really get into something, I mean, I like to think I still do it. Like we'll talk about kids later, but like, I started getting into coaching. I really dove in. Like I'm,
right.
When I like something, I dive in head first. I become a little obsessive compulsive, right? So when I first started getting into radio, I would compile air checks of people around the country, take a little bit from each. Like, ooh, I like how he does that. Remember like California air checks? I don't know if that was just a top 40 guy thing, but there'd be videotapes of like Broadway Bill Lee and some of these legends and watching them in the studio. And I would do that. I would find air checks and listen to different DJs. There was a point where if you named a city, I could tell you the station, the program director, and who's on the day parts. Like I was a bit obsessive compulsive about it. I wanted to be in the know,
Yeah.
So when you transition from Kid Kelly, Z100, you come out of that contract and go over to SiriusXM, you walk into the Wild West. There's no telling, what's coming your way. Did you walk in there with a vision, with expectations? Was there something laid out for you? Like, what were you walking into?
Interestingly enough, I remember taking a significant pay cut because, New York, no matter how young I was, it was union, it was AFTRA, SAG. So, for a 20-year-old kid, I was buying the good beer, let's say that, And I go to SiriusXM, and at first it was like, yeah, we can't pay you what they were paying an on-air New York talent. So I remember taking a pay cut, not really knowing where this was going. And you're right, it is a little bit of a kick to the nuts ego-wise because everyone is like, oh, you're on the air at Z100 or Touche, like WFAN, and now you're like, no, I'm at Sirius Radio. And everyone's like, I'm sorry, I don't have that. So, but I do remember thinking like, all right, it keeps me in New York. And, at the time, I really didn't feel like leaving and going somewhere else. Not because I was nervous to do that. I just felt like so many people found their way to New York eventually. I started there. So unless it was a really cool job, I didn't feel like going in reverse. Like I was okay with the idea of, hey, I had the radio chapter of my life. What's next? Because I wasn't going to be like, all right, now let me go to Boise and do afternoons. Like that wasn't in my cards,
So was that the deal? Like when your contract was up at Z, they basically said they were not going to renew you.
Yeah.
Or was simply that you're going to make the jump.
Well, you know what? It was one of those like I guess fired would be the word, but it wasn't like a mean firing. Like it was one of those, hey, as you know, it could be sports, top 40, rock.
Right.
If a new regime of programmers comes in, they bring their own guys and they shake it up. I was a Kid Kelly guy, so when he left,
right.
like
they got rid of his regime.
Yeah, like because there were a couple regimes in there, and it's almost like, remember when Sirius and XM merged? They were XM people and Sirius people, and the people that were too much like, yeah, fucking XM later,
Right, exactly.
So
what would you say was the biggest difference when the biggest differences between doing commercial radio and now doing for however long you've done at this point for the bulk of your career doing satellite radio?
Interestingly enough, I think meeting and talking to people around the country, as corny as that sounds, when you're in New York, everyone is like, hey, Jersey, oh, Italian guys. Yeah. Like I grew up in a very Italian town on Long Island, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. My joke is always, if you're on the subway, like I'm 6 foot, I feel tall in New York because it's all Puerto Rican guys, Italian guys, and Asian guys that are like short. Unless it's a black dude, I'm the tallest guy on the subway. And it's very, hey, New York pizza. Hey, like I remember having a conversation with Covino early on, and I'll tell you how that started, Covino and Rich, in a minute. But I remember early on mentioning that I had penny alla vodka for dinner, and all the calls were like, what's vodka sauce? So you forget you're very in a New York bubble. You're in a market. If you're the guy that's only done radio in Texas, you don't know LA, New York, Miami. So I thought it was cool to start getting perspective about prices, preferences, food, style, everything. So, like for instance, like Covino and I would joke about like, what are you wearing, like a pair of Oakleys and this? And it's like, no, there's guys around the country that's their style. Like they wear Oakleys and polo shirts and they golf. Like so you learn quickly. I love the idea of learning everyone's life,
Yeah. So let's start getting into like what you were doing at Sirius, meeting Covino. I want to talk about your partner because you've been with him for 2 decades now, at least, right?
Oh my God. It's our longest relationship.
Yeah. So I want to talk about how that relationship started. Were you thrust into it? Did it happen naturally? And I also want to know, like, were you under contract at Sirius? Was when they took you on, was it, we're going to do it for a year, or it was just your full-time indefinitely?
I think in the beginning, it wasn't even like a host on a talent contract. I think I was like an employee of SiriusXM.
Sure. Yeah.
And I remember that because in the beginning, I would get things like stock options and things that employees got. And then once you get a contract, you're just, a host.
That goes away when you're a host?
Yeah, it's funny. Like the perks that you do get as an employee.
Yeah.
I mean, you get benefits and stuff, but those other little things like bonuses
options,
those things
future.
Like
a future.
Yes, exactly. So I start working there, and the only way for them to give me, I guess, a little more money, so I could be like, hey guys, like I was coordinating some of the channels. So I was a music coordinator, as they call it, and I quickly realized that I was really quick at it and good at it. And I realized, not to brag, but I'd be done by lunch. And I'm like, what is everyone else dilly-dallying? And it made me realize, like, I'm not cut out for this, because if you work hard and fast, like, there's a lot of people that, like, it would be lunchtime, and I'd be like, all right, I programmed the 80s channel, this and that for tomorrow. And everyone else is like, yeah, dude, like, slow down. Like, slow down. So I was coordinating. The 80s channel had started, and Nina Blackwood, Mark Goodman, and all the
legends
DJs signed on. And my job was to sort of run that channel, load their voice tracks into the system while doing voice tracking on Hits One, the pop channel.
Right.
Then at some point, about 6 months into that, if you remember when print media was a thing, Maxim Magazine wanted to do a deal with Sirius. And that's where Covino and Rich comes into play. So around this time, I know Covino because he's working at K-Rock in New York, but he's also voice tracking on SiriusXM's like Octane and Turbo and all those rock channels. So Covino and I know each other. We're mutual radio buds. When him and I met, we became friends real quick. It's like, it was almost like Zach and Slater. I say because like we were great wingmen, because if we met girls, it's like, all right, do you like the handsome Latino guy or the white guy? Like, we're not competing. he's rock guy, I'm pop guy. I'm Mets guy, he's Yankees guy. Like we always got along, but we were different yet the same, if that makes any sense. And
totally.
They said, hey, we're pushing this Maxim thing. We want to do a talk channel. And I got to give Covino credit because he was very adamant, like, dude, it's got to be me and you. And they tried to team me and him up with Demos, who's a great radio host, but that didn't work. They were like, what about Madison? Or they were trying to just separate Covino and I, or like, you should be a lead on this show and you should be a lead. And Covino was adamant. They're like, no. Covino and Rich and Covino, whatever you want to call it, just like, why are you separating us? Like, their thought was, why put two leads together? And we were like, no, that's us, you know? So, and that after demos, we celebrated 20 years. December 2004 was our first show for Maxim Radio.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And how much does, I guess, having that great partner play into the choices that you then make for the next 2 decades? I mean, think about how different your life might have been if that partnership doesn't occur.
It's interesting you would say that, and I think what's good about that is that him and I keep each other in check. We also keep each other thinking young and looking young, because I feel like if one of us all of a sudden just didn't start caring or let themselves go or became greedy, like we never allow each other to have an ego, and we always make the same amount of money. Like we've agreed that no different agents and this and that. We always, it would never end up good if one was like, wait, you negotiated for 20 grand more from this than I did. Or we always agreed we're in it together. And we realized, like, once we started having success together, like, let's not fuck up a good thing. Yeah. And you know, whether it's a meddling ex-wife or, you know, an annoying family member or coworker, like no matter what it is, we can't let anything get in the way of this.
That's amazing. So what was that first thing? You get teamed up, you guys are the guys. What was that first thing you guys did together?
The first, you know what's funny is I always remember this. Right around the time we were pitching the show, Larry, you may remember this because you're so old school. I love it. They used to do something called the Sirius Rhythm of the Road Tour.
Okay, yes, I remember this.
I don't remember
They
that.
would send some of the hosts out, and it was actually, you know, good talent fee appearance money, but they'd be like, hey, go to Daytona Beach, and, you know, they pop up some signs, and they had Pam Anderson cutouts, because remember, she was part of Sirius.
Our spokesperson, right?
Yeah. I just remember there being a Pam Anderson cardboard cutout.
Yep.
And you know, just me and Covino with Sirius, it was like turn on. There was like an on-off shirt, like Sirius turn on. And that was like our first event right around the time we were working out this deal. And I just knew we had something because we just got along so well. But I remember we were talking to these girls and they wanted to go in a hot tub with us. And we didn't have bathing suits. And I was very quick to be like, dude, just get down to your underwear. He's like, bro, I don't get down to my underwear. And at that point, I was like, this is a topic already. Fucking 2 hot girls want to get in a hot tub. And you're like, I'm not wearing the right underwear.
Oh, my God.
So I just knew that immediately our content, just based on our personality differences, like I'm a dance at the party, make a fool of myself. He's a, I got to look cool. So I knew that would be good, you know?
Yeah.
So that's a good bit of yin and yang between the two of you, which is always a great thing for any type of relationship like that. And you know, you mentioned it before that this is one of the longest relationships you've had in your life.
Yeah.
How have you guys been able to balance your professional life with your personal lives? Obviously, right? Because I mean, family does play a major role in both of your lives. How have you been able to balance that?
You know, giving each other a little grace from time to time when it matters, but neither one of us have ever like poorly prioritized. Like, listen, if there's something he has to do with his daughter, of course I'm gonna be like, that's the most important. If I have something with my kids, we're very flexible. Like, and I just know we both have the work ethic where we're not gonna let shit fall by the wayside. And listen, there was a time where his ex-wife was in LA and I was in New York and he was going back and forth, but we made it work. And there were times where I was redoing my house and living in Texas for 2 or 3 months, and he understood. So it's a matter of just understanding each other and being like, listen, let's not let anything get in the way of this. And yeah, no, it's really just that. It's we even agreed to move to LA together. That was a big deal too, you know?
I want to ask you a little bit about your idea of doing a show. And now, obviously, this has nothing to play in. This is not meant to, cause any type of rift between you and Covino, but the differences that you feel between doing a tandem show and then doing a solo show, like you would probably do for music, like you're doing with Z, you were a solo host there. Here, obviously, with you and Steve, you guys are obviously the duo, the team over at Sirius. What's the biggest contrast for you there?
I thrive on conversation and conflict or camaraderie or reminiscing together or fighting. To me, it makes great radio. Now, I'm not saying there's not a place for solo acts. Like, I love a great Colin Cowherd analogy. I love a good Adam Shine monologue. You know, these are great things, but I could never do that. There have been times where we've done, on a rare occasion, like, yeah, could you roll solo today? Yeah, but you know what I'm doing a lot of times? I'm rolling off my producer or the board op or something, because to me, something going on in the world, like, hey, do you see Ohtani last night? Like, I want to talk to you about that, Larry. Me just hearing myself talk, I just find, I don't know, it just doesn't work for me. But delivering information in 30-second increments on like a music channel, I feel like that's a skill I've mastered at this point, so I get it. But I don't think I could ever do a sports show by myself without an ensemble, just because I could, but I don't think it would be that great, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I like riffing off of people too. That's why we do this as an ensemble. It's just
that's why we do this.
Exactly.
Like you guys busting each other's balls, having fun, laughing. Like, to me, I always found, like, and I'm not comparing it to a cheesy laugh track of a sitcom, but I always feel like when I hear people having fun, whether it's like the Stern Show and the just like back in the day, like Artie or someone, or Gary laughing, and him and Robin, or when Elvis Duran and his crew or anyone is laughing with each other. To me, that's contagious. When I hear certain shows on any network and it's like just someone talking without any laughter or levity in their voice, I'm like, fucking boring. Come on. Like, what are we doing? There's shows on networks I'm on that I'm like, come on.
Yeah. Speaking about work-life balance and things that happen on radio shows, you met your wife on your radio show. Is that true? Can you tell that story real quick?
I did. My wife, what I love about this is it shows you how, not to get all weird, but it shows you like butterfly effect and how one little thing, like
no wrong choices
and no wrong choices, no wrong choices. I think about this often recently because someone had asked me how I met my wife. And I remember she was in a swimsuit calendar for Hooters when she was in college. My wife worked at Hooters, and back then the Hooters and still is. I mean, it's not what it was, but it was a big brand. And another regional thing I realized was outside of New York. In New York, Hooters was like, man, whatever, weak. No one really loved Hooters in New York. There's one by Nassau Coliseum where the Islanders play. I don't remember going to Hooters, but around the country, guys go to Hooters to watch sports. It's a big deal around the country. And my wife was like, you know what? Let me try out for this calendar and the competitions. And she would win a hell of a lot of money. My wife like sort of ran the whole like bikini circuit for a while when she was like in college in her 20s. And she ended up winning Miss Hooters International, like $50,000, and was,
wow.
That was like her world in her early 20s, and got to go with Hooters to Iraq, Europe, all over the world. She was like essentially their spokesperson. And one of those
stops.
You went
to Hooters, Iraq? That's an odd place to go.
Hooters, Iraq. She went there with like a U.S. Hooters, Iraq. It was
a burqa.
Yes. You went to Hooters, Baghdad?
The jokes write themselves right there. Oh my God.
Very funny.
Oh my God.
She tells a story of she was in Saddam Hussein's house after he had been captured. Like so she had some pretty cool experiences, all for a brand that has to do with titties and wings. She's had some cool experiences.
That's crazy.
And but the butterfly effect thing, the no wrong choices. There were, I believe, 8 girls that came to SiriusXM, and arbitrarily, Larry, someone from the talent department was like, all right, you 4 go on this show, you 4 go on that show.
Right.
Whoever that was, whether it was, I don't know, think back in the day, like Annabella or Spencer, I don't know who the hell it could have been.
Sure.
Some random Stephanie Sacco, remember that name?
Somebody in talent relations
that name.
chose for you.
Oh my God.
Someone was just like, all right, and you on that side. And that side meant Covino and Rich.
Yeah.
And It's cool that I have the audio of my wife and I introducing ourselves to each other.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's something pretty cool. I'm like, what's your name? She's like, Sarah. And I said, wow, Texas, the most beautiful women in the world. That was what I said.
Wow.
And that night, the Hooters girls were in town. They went out for like a nice dinner with their marketing people. And she's like, why don't you come out and meet for a drink? And I was like sort of fresh out of a relationship. And I'm like, I'm going to fuck this up. So I sort of was like, yeah, I really can't. And I'm like, what was I thinking? But perhaps it made her be like, ooh.
Yeah.
And we long distance chatted for a couple months. And then I met up with her a couple months later. And, we did long distance for a year. She moved to New York. And that was
amazing.
In 2008, 2009, and here we are 15 years later with two kids living in the valley,
and with the family. So let's talk about all the shows you were on Sirius, because it wasn't just Covino and Rich, right? It wasn't just Maxim Radio. It was Morning Mashup, and like, talk about everything and kind of how it came about that you were just thrown on all these programs. I mean, Morning Mashup was the most listened to show on the most listened to channel, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you know what's so funny is that Nicole. So the Morning Mashup, we needed a morning show for the Top 40 channel. Kid Kelly believed in me, obviously, from Z100 days. So he's like, it's you. If you remember at the time, there was a very funny gay guy named Jason Drew.
I don't remember Jason.
You may remember him.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't remember Jason.
Okay. Sure. Jason Drew.
He's now down in Orlando, I think, or Florida.
He's doing news TV. Like, he's like the entertainment news guy. But Jason Drew was like a really, almost like fresh out of Modern Family, like sarcastic, like almost like, who's the redheaded guy on Modern Family? Mitchell, the character Mitchell. He was very like dry, funny gay guy. And then Stanley T is a college friend of Kid Kelly's. So it was, back then, Kid will admit, it was very stereotypical. He's like, black guy, gay guy, white guy. All right, they'll do it. And now we need a girl. It's really just old school putting together a show, let's be honest, right? Back, how things were done at some point, right? And Nicole was the front desk girl. And you might not remember this. Jeff Regan's wife, Serena, who worked at SiriusXM for years.
Absolutely, right.
She was the original girl on the Morning Mashup.
How about that?
And she was like, yeah, I don't know if I'm feeling this.
Right.
And, she went in her own direction. But she was originally the girl that hung out with us for a couple months. And then she was like, I don't know. Nicole was just the charismatic, young, pretty, funny girl that worked at the front desk. Again, no wrong choices. She was a temp that was assigned SiriusXM purely by all right, Nicole, you're going to go to 49th Street, SiriusXM. She was a temp. Again, no wrong choices, right?
Yeah, it's so true.
Nicole seemed to be a good fit because she was, and also, as they say in the industry, green. Like she was not like, she didn't have like a fake radio voice. She was just like a 20-something-year-old girl that lived in New York City that liked to go out and party and had good stories. Like, so it was very natural, right? So the four of us did the Morning Mashup for a decade. And the only reason I left the Morning Mashup was we had the opportunity, Covino and I, SiriusXM said they were expanding their LA offices. And anytime I had my contract negotiations at SiriusXM, a little behind-the-scenes stuff was they always seemed to value the talk side and Covino and Rich more than the Morning Mashup. And I also started doing television stuff with Covino. And I always thought that as much as I had a good camaraderie at the Morning Mashup, and yes, I had way more listeners with the Morning Mashup, it was, I never thought that was my lane because it was like they're there for Ed Sheeran and Taylor Swift. I just happen to be the voice that accompanies that. If you listen to Covino and Rich, you're listening for Covino and Rich.
Right.
So I always thought, like, am I betting on myself or am I betting on just being part of a big channel? Like, Hits One's huge. Like, you could put a bozo on Hits One and they'll be the most listened to,
Yeah. I want to talk about your favorite moments at Sirius before we move on to other stuff, because we always talk about how, like, in the hallways, like, Al Pacino will walk by and, like, whatever. Name a celebrity they've walked by and, brushed elbows with you or whatever. But, you're bringing these people into your studio. What was your favorite moment? Do you have a favorite radio interview, either that just memorable turned awful or just couldn't believe you were interviewing X, Y, or Z? Something like that?
Yeah, there's a couple. There's a couple that come to mind. My favorite moment, like just like a moment, was we're doing a town hall, which is the fishbowl in the lobby of SiriusXM. It's usually an interview, maybe a studio audience, and Covino and I, somehow, some way, you never know who you're going to click with. We created this really bizarre friendship with Henry Winkler, the Fonz.
Yes.
And over the years, and it started out as a joke. Like, before we met him, Covino and I would always say, like, as a joke, if, when we were doing Maxim, it would be like, all right, who's like an old school example of cool? So we'd always joke, like, in a scenario, like, yo, this girl dumped me, this and that. Hey, what would the Fonz do? That was like our joke. And then we had Henry on, and he just took a liking to us. Like, you guys are silly, but I like you. Yeah. You're good guys. I'm the Fonz. Like, he's just so gentle and kind.
In the very non-Fonz way, right?
And we're in the fishbowl, and Bruno Mars is walking by. Henry Winkler pops out of his chair, and he's like, oh, my God, I love him. Bruno Mars. And Bruno sees that, makes eye contact, comes around, pops in the fishbowl. You can find this on YouTube. It's available.
That's great.
And they just have a love fest for each other. He's like, I love you. And Bruno Mars starts talking about, you're the Fonz. This is surreal. And he's like, but I love your album. I love you, Bruno. He's like, no, I love you, Henry. And Covino and I are just sort of sitting back watching this cool moment unfold. Another cool moment, we're doing one of our Covino and Rich conventions where we have our listeners visit New York, set up a bunch of cool events. We have the fishbowl packed, the lobby's packed, and for some reason, Steven Tyler must be doing something with the rock channels. Now, we know that Steven Tyler could hear us only because they were putting our show on through the lobby and the men's bathroom. So we're in the middle of our show with our listeners, and we're like, oh, my God, there's Steven Tyler. He walked in the bathroom, and Covino goes, well, wait a minute. Steven Tyler absolutely hears everything we're saying now. So he's like, hey, Steven Tyler, I know you're holding your penis right now. we know you're in there. So hope you're doing well. Big fan, Steven Tyler. So don't forget to wash your hands. So, like, he's sort of talking to Steven Tyler through the PA.
That's great.
In the bathroom. Steven Tyler comes out laughing, comes in the fishbowl, and we do like an impromptu 30-minute interview. Like, that wasn't scheduled or anything. He tells his publicist, like, no, I want to do this. And I always thought that was really cool.
That bathroom is very famous for those encounters, too. I remember walking in, and how many famous people have you seen, like, in there? But I remember walking in, and literally there was, like, 4 or 5 urinals, and, like, I'm at one, and on both sides of me, I'm flanked by Motley Crue peeing.
Oh, geez.
This is one of those moments, man.
Not to one up you, Larry. I used to joke that there was a time I went in the bathroom, and the urinals to the left and right of me were Bret Michaels and Hulk Hogan. I was like, blonde dudes with bandanas.
My highlight was watching Eminem and a little Eminem practicing their dance moves in the mirror as I'm trying to do my thing at the other end. I'm like, I got to get out of here. This is too crazy.
Great moments at Sirius.
I got one more that doesn't involve me, but you'll laugh because you guys all know the guy. If you know SiriusXM, Jose Mengen, the most rock guy ever. Jose, brother. Jose's like a caricature of, I can't describe it.
Yes.
Brother. I remember being in the lobby. I walked through the lobby once, and he was doing a tour because, the company loves Jose because he's just he's charisma,
Absolutely.
to the 100th degree.
He is serious. He is all go serious 100%. That is Jose.
And I remember Jose is doing a tour in the lobby, and he's telling everyone, like, we get all types of people coming through these doors, brother. Like, SiriusXM. He goes, holy shit, look. And he turns to his side and he goes, Pat Sajak. And then he goes to the other, he goes, Chubby Checker. So just to watch Jose shout out Chubby Checker and Pat Sajak.
Yes.
Two people that are like so not in Jose's wheelhouse.
Yes. And it was always a weird dichotomy of like porn stars sitting next to priests, sitting next to, it was like,
dude,
this place.
You would see Cardinal Dolan and Father Dave in the lobby, and then Lisa Ann would be doing her fantasy football picks.
Can't make it up.
I do miss
Can't
those
make
days.
it up.
My
Yep.
God. You can't make that stuff up.
By the way, I have a question for you, Touche.
Yes.
Sorry to flip it on you. But when you were working in the sports department, were you there when Lisa Ann, the porn star, came aboard?
Yes, I was there.
I always wondered when the big dogs at SiriusXM would be like, oh, yeah, I'm well aware of who you are. Was that their way of saying I've jerked off to you?
This is a really good question. I don't think I actually ever really I don't think I really actually went that far to say.
Like
hey,
if Steve Torrey or my good pal,
like, I mean, look,
if Stevie Cohen said that, if Stevie Cohen or Steve Torrey or one of these guys that I love, good friends, if they said, "Oh yeah, of course, Lisa Ann," of course, Lisa Ann, is that your way of saying?
I am not going to answer that question because these are people who know me, know where I live, and if I say the wrong thing, they'll come get me.
Oh my God, that's brilliant.
So
all I will say is that I knew who she was and I knew what she did.
So let's turn Larry's question around a little bit. So those were unbelievable moments and great highlights. Were there any landmines that you walked into or interviews that were set up? You were like, oh no, this is just a disaster.
It's funny. People ask that question, obviously, to all of us when we do this. I haven't really had many bad experiences because you got to remember, if someone comes on your show, usually they're coming there with a positivity. Even people that are known to be, like everyone would always say, Jeremy Piven, what a prick. He was always so nice to me. But then again, he's on my show. Right. Why would he be an asshole? Right. However, two people do stand out. Molly Ringwald came on the show. And she's like, I don't want to hear this. She said, yeah, I am not going to talk about anything from the past. And I'm like, well, then what the fuck are we going to talk about? I mean, like, respectfully, then what,
she's not going to talk about Pretty in Pink?
Didn't we have that problem with Herman Munster? Fred Gwynn, didn't he do that to us?
I don't know.
I think that happened to us.
I remember we had a Sean Astin.
No Herman Munster, no My Cousin Vinny. Next, like, what?
We had a Sean Astin moment on the fellas.
Oh, that was crazy.
He needed a cold compress. It was a whole
and his
thing.
handlers, it blew up everything about Rudy for us.
Okay, what was the second one?
So that was Molly Ringwald. I'm sorry.
Molly Ringwald, and I'm trying to think. I remember, like, as far as there's some musicians that are like Mariah Carey needed certain flowers and drinks and everything in Studio One, and we'd be waiting around for 2 hours. And listen, I'll be honest. The older I get, there's one thing that I have no tolerance for anymore, and it's one thing that I will I won't stand by. I won't put up with, which is waiting for like a diva's schedule, right? Like, to me now, if I was at SiriusXM now and you're like, yeah, Mariah's running 2 hours behind, I'd be like, all right, I'm going home. Like, I'm not, I'm not waiting for Mariah Carey for 2 hours. Like, I was at SiriusXM in LA, like maybe a year ago doing an interview, and it was like a newer artist. And they were like, yeah, they're running like an hour behind. And I was very close to being like, yeah, guys, I'm gotta go put my kid to bed. I don't know what you want me to tell you.
Right.
So I think it was like divas like that, or when you were told like you can't ask anything and they're the hot artist of the moment, but it's like, hey, they're in the middle of a scandal, but don't talk about A, B, and C.
Right.
Then you're like, then you feel like you're doing a shit interview,
Right.
Right.
We weren't allowed to ask Dakota Fanning about money, I remember.
Yeah, that was a big thing. And Tom Seaver was supposed to be a problem, but he wound up being great.
Tom Seaver was great. He was a sweetheart. Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about your transition now to the TV side of things, because I know that when you and Rich were doing, when you and Steve were doing your Maxim show, at some point you guys made the transition to doing, I think it was Talking Heads,
SNY.
SNY.
Yeah.
No, I mean we were doing Covino and Rich. They gave us a half hour every day, man. And
that was great.
That was
great, Rich.
That was the most fun Steve and I ever had on TV. And
how'd that come about?
So the story is pretty awesome, really. We're at the Super Bowl for SiriusXM, and Tim Tebow is like the most protected guy at this moment. This is when Tim Tebow is like, God. Like, even though he's like a backup quarterback, but everyone still loves Tim Tebow. He's doing very little press at the Super Bowl. When I tell you Tim Tebow could be standing here, if there was a beer within 2 feet of him, someone moved it away from him, so it didn't even appear as though it was his cocktail. Like, he was protected. For some reason, somehow, we got him on the show. And we made it very Covino and Rich light and stupid and funny. Tim Tebow's laughing. As Tim Tebow's laughing and we're having a funny time, like Guy Fieri also comes by with us. And Kurt Gowdy Jr., who runs SNY,
oh, wow,
happened to be walking by with Brad Como, who also was running SNY, probably still does. And they're like, what is going on here? And they were like, who are these guys? And I'm like, I'm a big Mets fan. I'm a New York guy. SNY, that was sort of their way of like saying, all right, well, we're doing like Adam Shine and Wheelhouse and all these loudmouths and all these like very New York Daily News Live. What could we do to sort of break that up with something lighter? And they really let us just do what we wanted. If we wanted to come in one day and do like 80s movie trivia on SNY, they'd be like, yeah, go ahead, do 80s movie trivia. They were so fucking cool. And I had more fun doing that TV show than anything we did anywhere else, whether it was ESPN or any, like, ESPN was a great opportunity, but they didn't get us the way SNY did. SNY got us. Like, they were like, do you guys. And that's why I love Scott Shapiro so much at Fox Sports and Don Martin. They're like, and we'll get to that, I'm sure, but they are like, do you guys.
How long were you on SNY?
2.5 years. And around the time our contract was coming to an end, I wasn't sure if they were going to renew us or not, but I wasn't going to let SiriusXM know that. Shh. So that's when they said, do you guys want to move to LA? I was like, but we're going to have to give up SNY. So cha-ching. And that they were like, okay. I was like, oh, okay. So I, we never really renegotiated with SNY because SiriusXM's like, we'll make up for that. Go to LA.
That was literally my next question. So what were those circumstances? What took you out west?
So Covino's ex-wife, and I'm sure the whole joke is I can't go a day without bringing up his ex-wife. But
you've now brought her up at least 3 times in this conversation.
But he met her, and she was living out here in L.A., and, Covino probably had all these pipe dreams of like, oh, yeah, I'll get out to L.A., and, we had the opportunity, and my wife and I were, relatively newlyweds living in Manhattan. I was living in Midtown, Larry. I was living 3 blocks away from SiriusXM because SNY and SiriusXM were right there.
That's perfect.
And it was great. But my wife and I are like, listen, if we want to start a family, we're going to move to Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut. Like, I just didn't feel like being that Long Island Railroad guy. And I said, you know what? Like, why not? Like, let's do it. No offense to my family. They aren't like the type that we're going to be like, grandma and grandpa, like here all the time. So I was like, let's do it. So we moved to LA and Covino was able to be near his kid full time. And it was a good move for the show and everything. It gave us new life as well,
So let's talk about the Fox Sports stuff. How does that come about when you get out there? Does it happen right away or what happens?
So let me just skip by a pretty big step along the way. So when we're out here, we're on SiriusXM. But we're on early, which is fine for me. But there was a time we were on 6 to 9 a.m. or 7 to 9 a.m. or 7 to 10 a.m. because on the East Coast, you got to remember, East Coasters, when you're an East Coaster, you think everything revolves around your time zone.
Right.
So you're like, yeah, those guys are on from 9 to noon. When you go out to LA, you're not on 9 to noon anymore. You're so that 4:30 alarm goes off and you're like, shit. But I did commercials for a little while. So like they joked that like there's a bunch of like shitty B-level commercials I was in for a couple of years because I had all afternoon to do whatever. And then about a year into it, our buddy Sean Wyman, who was such a good friend, Sean was the guy that loved our show and he had worked at ESPN. He's like, I'm a producer. The minute I get any power, you're my guys. People don't know it, but you're the guys. So Sean goes from producing Mike and Mike to becoming part of the talent department. The minute he gets in the talent department, he's like, you got to get these guys a show. And we got the opportunity to do a half-hour late-night show on ESPN2 for a couple hours. And I enjoyed what Covino and I were doing, but, sometimes like the producer and the team they put you with, for budget reasons, we were working with like the Deportes guys a lot. And no offense to them, but like, they were like, hey, let's talk about soccer and this and that. And like, I learned a great lesson, Larry, that we all learn in broadcasting, which is like, you got to stand your ground because I'm too much of a yes man. And this is where I learned that lesson because I was like, yeah, okay. And I should have instinctively been like, no, but we did a good show for a couple of years. COVID happened. We did the show from home for a year, got paid, which was fine. Yep. But then eventually they were like, if you're not Stephen A. Smith or someone important, if your contract's up, COVID, sorry. And, that sort of went away. Around the same time, Covino and Rich on SiriusXM, our contract was up. And they were like, I love SiriusXM. I've been there 20-something years. But as far as Covino and Rich go, they gave us hey, we want to give you a pay cut and a non-compete. And I was like, pay cut and a non-compete.
Wow. Hell no.
Ouch.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, I love you guys. You love me, I thought.
You love me so much.
Yeah, like can like I still do the music channels and be full time and like
No.
you know and they were like, all right. So I did work out a deal with Steve Blatter's always looked out for me. I love Steve Blatter. You know, him and he seems to take a liking to me. So good dude for me. You know, Scott and Andrew Moss, all good to me. Those are the behind the scenes serious people. So I've been there for, you know, all these years now. I'm still a full-time employee, you know, salary adjusted, but I'm with the Pulse and Pop 2K and Covino and I were able, the carve out was I could stay at SiriusXM, but I could bring Covino and Rich somewhere else.
Wow. That's a great,
which was an awesome,
great deal.
You know, it's just like, you know, at SiriusXM, I'm Rich Davis, host of Pop Stuff.
Yeah.
Exclusive to SiriusXM. No Spotify, no iHeart. When it's pop radio, that I am SiriusXM's little pop bitch.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the brand of Covino and Rich, wherever you want to take it, and Scott Shapiro at Fox Sports Radio knew what we were doing, and he is honestly the guy that I've worked for since Kid Kelly that's got me the most. He's our age. He gets it. He and Don Martin, who is like the big dog at Fox Sports and iHeart, they know what Covino and I do. And they're about to have a conversation about who's the next show they want to elevate. And they're like, no, you go first. No, you go first. Not realizing they were both going to say Covino and Rich. So we got major support from all the folks at Fox Sports Radio. And we've been there. And honestly, when I tell you the support we get, and no one... Like, it's never like, guys, talk about more sports. Like, today we talked about Nick Cage and how he's going to be playing John Madden for an hour. Like, they'd probably say, great, because we've had enough Denver Nuggets Thunder preview, you know?
Yep.
Like, so they like what we do, and so we're there. I'm there. Also doing SiriusXM full-time, and I also do another podcast.
Yes. Talk about it.
Actually, thank you for leading us into that. So, tell us about the podcast.
So, Nicole from the Morning Mashup, who I worked with for all those years, her and I were really close. We're like, she's like a sister I never had. That she's like a stepsister because we flirt a lot, but she's not like a real sister. So Nicole and I were always very close. Always had like a fun, flirty, lovable vibe. Like her and I are super tight. I fucking love Nicole. And when I left New York, she'll admittedly say, like, she cried. Her husband's like, what, do you love him? You know, because we were so good together on the air. No offense to Stan and Ryan, but Nicole and I always had just a great chemistry. And I said to her, I go, I promise you, you're new to this world. I am not. You'll see people again. I'm like, I will work with you again. I promise you. I don't know how or when, but it'll happen. And SiriusXM started trying to expand their podcast division when they started acquiring like Stitcher and a lot of those podcast companies. And they're like, Rich, do you want to do a podcast about pop music or the 2000s or anything? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I'm doing sports for Covino. I like music. I'm like, and at the time I was a new dad. And I said, you know what is on my mind a lot? The fact that I'm a guy that was quote unquote a playboy and like a single guy, and my whole world was Maxim and girls and party and all that. And now like, I'm watching cartoons and feeding a baby. So I'm like, I think there's something to be said about the transition to fatherhood, which is such a big step for every man, right?
Yep.
So I said, you know what? Nicole is a new mom. Nicole, what do you say? And she's like, oh my God, Nicole, oh my God, girl, let's do it. And, so
was she on air at that point?
She's still doing the morning mashup. She's there every day. So she's there. And, Nicole and I said, let's do it. And it was around the time of COVID. So there was no opposition to, I'm in LA, she's in New York, because even the people in the same city were in Zoom situations. So again, no wrong choices.
Yeah.
Right. Like all these things have to line up for a reason. Like perhaps if it was a year earlier, they would have been like, yeah, well, you're in LA, she's in New York. Like do it with a host near you, you know?
It's amazing how COVID has changed all of that. The notion of what a broadcast actually is.
Dude,
absolutely.
Touche, I will say one thing. One thing I brought to Fox, and it's not even revolutionary. I'm shocked that they were still doing like phoners. And I'm like, why are we doing phoners? Like, because I remember we're going to have a guest on. I'm like, send them a Zoom link. That way we could do video if we want, or like it's clearer. It sounds better. And they're like, yeah, but we don't. I'm like, no, you used to not. We're going to do Zoom. So
yeah, exactly.
Like COVID there, you know, if you're going to pull positives out of it, it sort of gave our industry some benefits and some leverage,
totally.
Right? Some leeway.
It opened up a whole different way to think of what broadcasting actually is.
Yeah.
You know, Rich, we talk all the time on the show about how, you know, this person is built for this. You know what I mean? And like, I'm just listening to you tell your stories and like, you were so built for this. Like, if you weren't doing this, what would you possibly be doing, man?
Would you be having the tie at the PR firm?
Dude, Larry, I think about that often because there were moments like when ESPN went away and SiriusXM's like, hey, non-compete. And there were times where I'm like, and by the way, that was right around the time I bought my house. So you can imagine I was like, I had the nervous shits like every day.
Yeah,
so definitely. But yeah, I do feel like I found what I'm supposed to be doing, as corny as that sounds. And like I said in the beginning of this interview, in the beginning of this, I don't even want to call it an interview, a hang with my friends. In the beginning of this hang, like I said, I like watching sports. I like talking to my buddies, and I like talking about being a dad. I cover it, you know, and Nicole and I talk a lot about, like, right now, it's a lot of coaching. I'm the coach of a T-ball team. My son's 5U, and I coach my daughter's 8U softball team. So I am Coach Rich. Many people around here know me as Coach Rich these days.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Love it.
You know, you've been in this business for so long. You've seen it literally flip upside down, where you started on FM, you went to Sirius, now you're podcasting, you've been on TV. You have to constantly evolve and change. You know, what are some of your broad observations about the industry from when you first walked in to where you are today?
Resistors fail. Like, there's always going to be something. I remember early on in my career when I would see some of the older DJs being like, but with computer system, I like CDs and records. And it's like, why are you resisting? Like, you will get left behind, right? It's like, I don't want to post that on social media. You will get left behind.
Disappear.
I feel like I always say David Letterman was brilliant in that when he realized late night TV started to become social media clips to watch the next day, he's like, I'm out. He knew when it was time. And then he came back and he's like, I'm going to do a Netflix interview show because that's where my strengths could be used. Like, imagine if Letterman stuck around another couple years. People would have been like, oh, Dave needs to retire. He knew when it was like, oh, did you see Carpool Karaoke? Dave didn't have a Carpool Karaoke. He's just a great interviewer and a funny guy. So I think it's resistors will get left behind. And, you know, Kid Kelly said early on in my career, if you're kind to people and you you keep your nose clean, if you're not an asshole, you're kind to people and you're good, there'll be a place for you. And you realize
that's basically the advice we have for everybody on this show. Like, hey, be someone that people enjoy being around, and you'll be successful.
Bro, there's people that I've worked with at SiriusXM, ESPN, and Fox, on-air talent that I hear producers say, thank you so much for, and I'm like, thank you. Like, you're part of the team. They're like, no, but that host, they told me to shut up and don't speak unless spoken to. And I'm like, hosts say that? What assholes? Like, I'm shocked to this day how ego will ruin some folks. So be kind, keep up with stuff. If anything, the one thing I wish I had done differently was early on, and I blame SiriusXM jokingly, but not. When social media first started, they were like, don't go on that, don't do it.
Oh.
And I remember, like, when Twitter and all that first started, they were like, they don't mention it on air. They looked at it as like competing media. So when everyone was accumulating their followers, we were like handcuffed. Oh, man. And then fast forward 10 years, they're like, how many followers you have?
Right.
You mean for the platform you told me to ignore when it was building? Like,
you like us, we've done a lot of different media. We've done a lot of media platforms. Radio, you've been there. You've been obviously radio. You've done satellite. You've done podcasting, television. You've seen all of these mediums now change over the years, and we're one of these guys who've been kind of on that cutting edge of that technology too. What would you say have been the biggest changes you've seen, maybe from one to the next, or do you see like a line that connects all of them?
I think the one cool thing for all of us is that audio entertainment is thriving and is big and better than ever. It's just spread out a bit, right? Like people want to listen to podcasts and radio and all that. It's healthier than ever. Yeah. But go on Marketplace or go on eBay or anything. A lot of podcast equipment for sale because people think they could do it and can't do it. You guys can. Not everyone can, right? I mean,
you can too.
So you realize that it's healthier than ever. But I think the biggest change for me is, unfortunately, I struggle sometimes giving advice to a younger kid, right? Because there used to be a template, and that template was work hard. You may have to start in a smaller market, send out your air checks, study other people. You might need to move to another city, roll with that. Now my advice is sort of like, I don't know, like start your own podcast and like hope it gains momentum. I struggle with how to tell, like, let's say like a young kid at Fox Sports that's like a good editor or producer or a guy in the editing room, like, I don't know, you have really fun takes on the NFL draft. Make some TikTok videos. I really have no advice that we would have given someone maybe 15 years ago, right?
I agree with you 100%.
Like if you guys know some young talented kid, isn't it almost tricky to tell them any good advice?
I think the word is try.
Yeah.
Just
most
try.
Of us just try. And I can't tell whenever a kid asks me, should I go out of my market to try somewhere else? Like, yeah, I mean, if you want, but the reality is that model is no longer reality.
Dude, and I hate to be on the now I feel like Ebenezer Scrooge because I'm on the flip side of that where I'm trying to get your market. Yeah. Covino and I are on 340 stations around the country for iHeart and Fox Sports. So like, you know what? 341. Sorry, kid. I just I hate to say it, but like Elvis Duran, like Bobby Bones, all these hosts that are just I look at it this way. Most jobs I had on my come up are not there anymore.
Wow.
Like I worked at Hot 107.9, like I said, in Syracuse. Elvis Duran does mornings there. Their night show is voice tracked. And so I look back at the steps I took and those steps aren't there. So that's what makes it tricky.
Incredible.
Interesting.
Incredible. What a journey. You've seen it all. You've touched it all. You've been seen everywhere, et cetera, et cetera. Just an incredible run. Rich, run through the list again because I tried at the beginning. I probably didn't capture everything. Where can everybody find you?
So Monday through Friday, Fox Sports Radio, 2 to 4 p.m. out here on the West Coast. So 5 to 7 for you guys on the East. You can hear it on the iHeart app or, anywhere you get podcasts. I'm on The Pulse every morning. I'm on Pop 2K in the afternoon. And Nicole and I do Have Kids, They Say. We got new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday. And I will say, I want to put it out there because when you put things out there, I feel like it happens, right? So there's a guy named Dan Patrick who's going to be hanging it up in 2 years. Just saying.
Oh, wow.
There's a guy named DP that's going to be hanging it up, and that would sort of be, that's
there you go.
That's my goal. That's the next
wow.
step.
I love
hell of a goal.
I love that.
That's the goal.
Are you saying you want to go solo then?
Covino left behind.
Does he know this?
He does now.
23 years is my limit.
Are we breaking something? You're going to ditch this guy in 2 years?
It's all over then. I'm gonna get a more handsome young Latino guy that appeals to a different demo.
I love it.
Great stuff.
Rich, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys. Great seeing your faces and great catching up. You guys are great.
So that was Rich Davis, who took us for a wonderful walk down memory lane. Rich, thank you so much for that. And Larry Shea, thank you so much for opening the door to bring him in.
Yeah, he's great interview, great guy. Really had a lot of fun with that. I got to tell you a quick story. Before we were going to do the interview, I was, just looking at some stuff, and my wife was kind of writing, and I'm like, this is who we're interviewing today. And I show her a picture of Rich. And, there's this old joke in radio, like, why'd you do radio? Because you got a face for radio, blah, blah, blah. Well, Rich is a really good-looking guy. This was not why he got into radio, There's no reason why he wouldn't be successful when you hear him tell his stories. I mean, I said it in the interview, and I mean it. He's so built for this. But the fact that he got the good looks and the good personality, like, that's unfair. I'm sorry. It's just unfair. But what a great dude. And, like, he really gave you a lot of nuggets. You know, he was really, like he said, when he gets into something, he goes full bore. So for him to, you know, find it at a young age and to just realize in the heat of the moment, like, boom, this seems interesting to me. He went at it full force. He got himself a great mentor in Kid Kelly, and the rest, they say, is history. But there were a lot of twists and turns along the way, and who wouldn't want to work with that guy? He said it, right? I mean, I want to work with him. It was my favorite moment of the day. He'd finish his show, and he would see me in the hallway, and we would just, you know, talk about life, sports, whatever. It was just good times, man. Thank you, Rich, for joining us. That was really a lot of fun.
You know, it reminds me of the times. The one thing you brought it up, Shay, during the interview, and obviously Rich did as well, was, you know, you get spoiled when you were at a place like Sirius for a long time because, you know, it's not like the rest of the world where you don't see celebrities every day kind of walking in and out. And we had the opportunity, the three of us had the opportunity to speak to Bill Walton, and then Bill Walton would, you know, walk into the Sirius studios once a month to do stuff. After a while, you get spoiled seeing, you know, legends like that walking through the halls. You know, Grandmaster Flash,
Martha Stewart.
Martha Stewart. I mean,
Robert Plant was my shock one day.
Sure.
Right, these people just kind of for me, Weird Al Yankovic, right?
Roger
Weird
Daltrey.
Al Yankovic
Yeah, I remember being in the elevator with Roger Daltrey, and like none of the business people that were in the elevator knew that they were literally riding in the elevator with the lead singer of The Who. I'm like, do you know who that is?
Yeah, you just get spoiled by having like these people come in and out of like who you're just kind of like what you're interacting with like it's every day. So you get used to that in an odd way. It spoils you for the rest of your life, to be quite honest with you. The one thing I was very taken with was the honesty that Rich had, especially about what the business has become now. Like, he's right when he says, you know, what is that advice you have to give to a kid who wants to come up in this industry now? And they say, hey, do I need to go to another market? Do I need to try and do this? What should I do? What should I do to try and hone my skills here? The reality is everything that Rich, you, myself, you, me, we all did to come up, that game has changed completely, right? So the notion of sending out that tape, that CD or that tape to 50 different people, that no longer is the way to really go about it. And it's tough to try and give that advice to a kid who wants to come up and say, okay, so what's the path? You know, we call the show No Wrong Choices for a reason, because maybe there is no real path to that end goal. I mean, there's obviously a roadmap there, but all roadmaps have the ways to get off that specific route to find your way to the end goal there. So I appreciated his honesty, because he's right. The game has changed, and if we don't understand the rules of this new game, it's going to leave you behind.
Absolutely. And the term that he used was resistor. If you are a resistor, you will be left behind and you will disappear. So there's this theme that we come up against or bump into all the time, which is about continuously learning, continuously evolving. And no industry requires that more than the one that we have been in for a long time, media.
And the one thing that, you know, seems to be a theme with a lot of our guests is that, look, you got to be a good guy. You got to be a good person. Someone people can at least deal with being around for 8 to 10 hours a day. If you're a son of a bitch, no one wants to work with you. That is plain and simple. If no one likes to work with you, no one will work with you.
Well, Rich clearly is a good guy. Everybody does want to work with him, and that has certainly been a great key to his success. Rich, thank you so much for joining this episode of No Wrong Choices. Thanks again for joining us. If this episode made you think of somebody who could be a great guest, we'd love to hear from you. Please reach out to us through the contact page of our website at norongchoices.com. While you're there, check out the blog for a deeper look at our takeaways from each episode. You can also connect with us on social media. We're on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and X. On behalf of Larry Shea, Tushar Saxena, and me, Larry Samuels, thank you again for listening. We'll be back next week with another inspiring conversation.